Riley glanced at her laptop screen and froze. An unread newsletter from her son's school was burning in her inbox. She was still listed as a parent contact at Rochester Elementary School, even though she was 3,000 miles away in Seattle. Her fingers trembled on the touchpad, and her cursor hovered over the subject line. Weekly update, events, student success, and guidance from the school psychologist. Riley swallowed and clicked on the email. For the first few seconds, she saw only blurry letters. Her heart was pounding in her throat. It took her several deep breaths to focus. She began to read, a typical school newsletter, as if she had never left. The letter opened with a welcoming paragraph from the principal, thanking parents for their participation in a fundraiser, announcing an upcoming Thanksgiving concert. Theo Brown received praise for science project, the student achievement section announced. Riley couldn't help but smile as she pictured her son proudly showing off his project to the class. Theo was 7 now, in second grade. She corrected herself. Almost 8, with a December birthday coming up. She'd missed so much. Her son had grown noticeably in the 2 years since she'd moved in. She remembered the last video Jason had sent her. Theo learning to ride a bike without training wheels. In the video, the boy wobbled down the driveway, Jason walking alongside, ready to catch him. At the end, Theo laughed happily, and a woman's voice cheered. Riley was wary. Whose voice was that? But she didn't watch the video again, afraid to find out. She continued reading the newsletter. Below was advice from a school psychologist, a column titled, Helping Kids Cope with Stress. At the bottom, in small print, Bethany Wilson, school counselor. The article talked about how important it was for children to feel stable and supported at home, especially when the family was going through changes. Riley blinked, her eyes stinging. It seemed like the words were directed at her personally. She skipped most of the text, coming across the phrase, let your child know they are loved, no matter what. Riley covered her mouth with her hand. No matter the circumstances, what had she let her son know? That her career was more important to her than him, that his mother had gone off to pursue her dream and left him behind. Her temples were pounding. She closed the lid of her laptop without finishing the letter. Her heart ached with a sharp sadness. It was late evening. A familiar rain was falling outside the Seattle window, the reflections of the streetlights flickering on the wet glass. The refrigerator hummed monotonously in the tiny kitchen. Riley wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to keep warm or protect herself from her own thoughts. 2,000 miles. 2 whole years. She convinced herself that she had done the right thing when she left. It seemed like her only chance to realize her long-time dream. But with each day of separation from her son, her doubts grew. Especially in the evenings when the noise of the workday died down and only she and her guilt remained. Riley opened her laptop again, scrolled to the bottom of the email. The last line read, if you have questions or need support, please reach out. Bethany Wilson, school counselor, Lake Avenue Elementary School. Bethany Wilson. She repeated the name to herself. She'd never heard of her before, probably a new employee. A lot could change in 2 years, even at a school. Suddenly, she wanted to know more how her son was living at school, how he was coping. Before, when they still called each other regularly, Theo didn't complain, but he didn't share much either. He was 5 when she left. Now he is older, he might have questions, grievances, and he might be talking about them with this Bethany and not with his mother. This thought pierced her heart. Riley automatically opened a photo on her phone. Theo and Jason in front of High Falls in Rochester, a summer ago. Theo was smiling broadly, with a dimple in his chin like she had when she was little. Jason had his arm around his son's shoulders, trying to smile for the camera, but even in the photo, Riley could see the quiet sadness in his eyes. They had been trying to be polite to each other back then. She had asked him to send her photos so she could watch her son grow up. Jason sent them sometimes without saying a word. How are you doing? She whispered into the void. Who should she ask this question to herself? Her ex-husband, the school counselor. She suddenly wanted so badly to call Theo right now, to hear his voice clear, beloved. Even though it was already night in New York, she took a risk. She reached for the phone, dialed Jason's familiar number. A beep, a second one. Her heart was pounding. On the third ring, she came to her senses. If it was night, they were probably asleep. She hung up, clutching the phone to her chest. "Oh my God, what have I done?" Riley said quietly. She tried to imagine what Jason and Theo were doing, what their routine had become without her. Perhaps Jason was reading his son a bedtime story, or tucking him in, adjusting the blanket. Such ordinary things, once familiar to her, and now someone else was doing them. There was no strength to return to the letter. Riley went to the bedroom, small, rented, with almost no things. On the nightstand there was a switched-off tablet with an unassembled prototype of a new project. During the day she enthusiastically drew interface mock-ups, but in the evening everything lost its meaning. She lay down on top of the blanket, staring at the ceiling. Words from the newsletter pounded in her head. Stability, support, loved, no matter the circumstances. She closed her eyes and let the tears flow. Somewhere far away, 3 time zones away, was her son, perhaps feeling abandoned. And here she was, alone in a strange city, with a school newsletter as her only link to her past life. That night, Riley couldn't sleep for a long time. The rain was roaring outside, and she kept hearing the broken dial tone of a failed call. It suddenly became clear to her. The thread is too thin. Something needs to change, otherwise she will lose her son forever. But before she acts, she must remember where this break began, step by step leading her to loneliness in rainy Seattle. 2 years earlier, Riley had lived a very different life. The small kitchen of her Rochester home was noisy and crowded. 5-year-old Theo had spilled milk on the counter, the cat had jumped on the windowsill, and the toast in the toaster was on the verge of burning. Riley was rushing between the stove and the dining room table, trying to get her son ready for daycare and not be late for work. "Mom, where's my green dinosaur?" Theo's voice sounded plaintive. He was stamping his feet while she tried to zip up his jacket. "Theo, honey, not now," Riley sighed, wiping the milk stain off his shirt. "We'll look for the dinosaur tonight, okay? We have to hurry now. But I need him in the group. I promised to show him." Tears glistened in the son's eyes. "Theo." She stopped and gently crouched down in front of him, meeting his upset gaze. "I promise you'll take the dinosaur tomorrow. Today, tell your friends you'll show it to them tomorrow, okay?" The boy sighed loudly, holding back tears with difficulty, but nodded. A sleepy Jason appeared in the kitchen doorway, straightening his tie. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing the tension on his wife's face. "Yeah, just like any other morning," Riley said with a tight smile. Theo was upset about his toy. "Hey, champ," Jason ran his hand through his son's hair. "Listen to your mom, okay? She knows what she's doing." Theo nodded, but looked dejected. Jason put his arm around Riley's shoulders and kissed her on the cheek. "I'll take him today, and you go straight to the office, don't worry." "Really?" Riley looked at her husband with gratitude. She had a call with a client on a new project in half an hour, and the baby was still walking around the house in a sock and one shoe. Sure, Jason was already helping Theo put on his second boot. "We can handle him." He smiled at his son. "Really, Theo? Let's race to the car." The boy beamed and ran out of the house after his father, forgetting about his tears. Riley exhaled, leaning her hip against the table. She closed her eyes for a moment in the quiet, empty kitchen. It had been a hectic morning, like most mornings. Jason had tried to help, but she still had to shoulder the brunt of the daycare, the dinners, the cleaning, the work. At 27, Riley was more tired than she had imagined in her youth. She once dreamed of a career as a designer in a large company and wanted to create interfaces used by thousands of people. She graduated from art college, became interested in UX design. But pregnancy with Theo changed her plans. She had to stay in her native Rochester, get a modest job as a graphic designer in a local printing house. The work was not enjoyable, but it allowed her to bend her schedule to fit in with kindergarten. Tomorrow she had a talk with her boss. She had been asking for a week to increase her hours or take her on a more serious project. instead of endless holiday flyers. She needed to grow in her profession somehow, otherwise her dream would get bogged down in everyday life. Riley felt that a little more, and she would not get out of the routine. She automatically turned on the laptop on the kitchen table while finishing her cold coffee. A window with a course on UX design, which she took at night, popped up on the screen. Yesterday, she had not managed to complete the task. She was too tired after a day of chores. However, as well as the day before yesterday, the course was moving slowly, and this upset her. Instead, she opened her email folder and skimmed through the new messages. Between the bills and the spam, her gaze caught the line, UX Seattle Conference registration open. Her heart sank. The conference in Seattle is the industry's largest event, where leading designers gather and companies scout for talent. Riley had long dreamed of going, but something always got in the way: pregnancy, a small child, finances. She clicked on the email, early bird discount, 4 months until the event. Conflicting thoughts raced through her mind. 4 months, was that enough time to save up for a ticket to Seattle and accommodations? Would her boss let her go for a few days? Who would she leave Theo with? Are you okay? Jason's voice came from the hallway. He had returned to the house to get his forgotten keys. Riley abruptly closed her laptop. Yeah, it's fine. Jason peered into the kitchen. His short blonde hair was still sticking out from sleep, and there was a red mark from the pillow on his cheek. He was in a rush and a little nervous. He had an important meeting at work, too. I'm running. I love you, he said as he walked, grabbing the car keys from the table. And you, Riley answered quietly, but he had already run out the door. She was left alone in the silent kitchen. In these moments, when the family ran off on errands, she often felt anxious. It seemed that life was passing her by there, beyond the walls of the house. Events were boiling, and she was stuck in an endless circle of worries. Riley opened her laptop again and reread the conference email. At the bottom was a link to volunteer. It could cut costs. Volunteers often get paid for part of their travel or accommodations. They need help at the front desk, room moderators. Her heart started beating faster. Maybe this was a chance to escape, even for a little while, to the world she dreamed of. Seattle, the capital of tech and design. Riley thought about the letter all day at work. The print shop smelled of ink and paper, and gray February clouds floated outside. She was editing a layout for a brochure for a local car dealership, but her thoughts kept returning to the conference. After lunch, she couldn't resist. She typed in the calendar on her phone and looked up the dates for the conference late June. Theo would be on vacation from preschool before school. Maybe she could send him to his grandmother for a week, if she could go herself. That evening, after putting Theo to bed, she cautiously brought it up with Jason. Only a floor lamp was on in the living room, and her husband was tiredly scrolling through the news on his tablet. Jace, remember I told you about the conference in Seattle I was dying to go to? She began, trying to speak calmly. Something like that. He looked up. It's somewhere on the West Coast, right? Yes, in Seattle. In June, for about a week. I was thinking. She cleared her throat, feeling a lump in her throat. Maybe I could go. As a volunteer. It's almost free, just the flight. She added quickly, I would take time off from work or even unpaid leave. It's very important for my career, you know. Jason put the tablet down, concern written all over his face. For a week, leave me alone with Theo? Well, Mom could help, or your parents, Riley said hesitantly. Theo will be with them. He'll like it. Your parents will be on a cruise then, you said, he reminded. Mine. Maybe, but they have their own things to do. Listen, is there any other way to improve your qualifications? An online course, for example? You're taking one, aren't you? Riley felt her inside sink. He didn't understand, or didn't want to understand. The conference is a chance to meet the right people, find the job of your dreams, she said quietly. I've been putting it off for so many years. Because we have a family, a small child, Jason answered softly, taking her hand. Ray, I'm not against your development, honestly, but now is such a period. Theo will go to school in the fall. He needs support. I also have a quarterly project at work. He hesitated, choosing his words. It will be hard without you. She took her hand away. Her chest was squeezed with resentment. Is it hard? Isn't it hard for me to sit in the printing house, knowing that nothing better might happen? Do you think it's not hard for me to do the same thing every day? Riley. He frowned. We're all tired. It's not easy for me either, you know. I know, she said, standing up. But the difference is, your career is growing, and I'm stuck. I'm only asking for a week, Jace. Now is not the best time, he replied wearily. Let's come back to this in a year, when everything has stabilized. The word stabilizes stung her. This again, putting off her dream every time for the sake of mythical stability. With children, is there ever a right time? She didn't answer. She just turned off the floor lamp. Okay, forget it, she said quietly into the darkness. Good night. He wanted to say something, but remained silent. Lying in bed, Riley stared at the ceiling. Theo was sniffling next to her after their conversation. She checked on him and didn't dare leave. She stayed lying next to him. In the half-light of the children's room, her eyes were getting used to the darkness. She thought about what she had said to Jason. Another year to wait, then another. You can wait forever. She was bitter. Why were her dreams always secondary? After all, she loved her son, she loved her husband, but didn't she have the right to want more? Her thoughts were racing, and among them one word kept flashing: Seattle. A city of opportunity, a new start. A city where she was not someone's mother or wife, but her own person. In the silence of the night, this desire to break free, to change life, grew stronger and no longer seemed so impossible. The July sun was blazing down as Riley's plane landed at Rochester Airport. She'd spent a week in Seattle attending a conference, and now she was finally home. Her shoulders were pleasantly tired. She'd slept 4 hours a night during those days, volunteering and soaking up every moment of the event. Her head was buzzing with impressions, talks by design gurus, new acquaintances, the lights of a big city where even the air seemed charged with energy and possibility. Jason and Theo were waiting for her at the baggage claim area. When he saw his mother, the boy ran to greet her. Riley hugged her son tightly, inhaling the familiar baby smell, a mixture of apple shampoo and chocolate chip cookies. Her heart sank with love and guilt at the same time. Mommy, you're back. Theo snuggled up to her. I missed you. I missed you too, darling, she whispered, kissing her son on the top of his head. Jason stood a little distance away, smiling, but his eyes were wary. Riley noticed the circles under his eyes, which meant the week without her help had been tough on him. Hi, she stepped towards him, trying to read his mood. Hi, he gave her a short hug with one arm and took her suitcase. How was your flight? Fine, Riley replied, holding Theo's hand. A little tired. Well, let's go home, Jason nodded towards the parking lot. On the way, her son chatted away about sleeping over at his grandma's, about how his dad let him stay up late on the weekends, about how they baked pizza together. Riley listened, but her mind was caught between warm memories of Seattle and anxiety. She knew she had a serious conversation with her husband ahead. That evening, after Theo had fallen asleep after an exciting story about his mother's gifts, Riley had brought him a t-shirt with a killer whale from the aquarium and a construction set. The couple were finally alone. Riley was nervously straightening the conference brochures on the living room table, brightly colored booklets, business cards of new acquaintances. Jason sat down opposite her, crossing his arms over his chest. Tell me how it all went, he began in a neutral tone. Riley spoke quickly and enthusiastically. It was amazing, Jace. I learned so much. Can you imagine? I got to personally talk to the art director of a well-known company. He looked at my portfolio, praised a couple of works, and I also met the guys who opened the startup. By the way, they invited me for an interview. She pulled a card from the stack and handed it to him. Jason glanced at it and handed it back without a word. An interview, he asked after a pause. Riley nodded, trying to remain calm. Yes, in Seattle in a month. They said they could even compensate for the flight if I decided to go. There was silence in the room. Jason clasped his hands. Are you going to accept the invitation? Riley swallowed. This was it. I think so. This is a real chance, Jason. It may not happen again. He shook his head, looking away. So after a week there, you decided. What? To move to Seattle? There was tension in his voice. I'm seriously thinking about it, she said, trying to keep her voice soft. There are so many opportunities for me as a designer. There won't be anything like that here in Rochester. I'm stuck. You have a family here, he said quietly, turning his gaze to her. A son. I know, Riley whispered, looking down. Do you think it's easy for me to even look at it like that? I hope not, Jason said, his voice bitter. Because I honestly can't wrap my head around it. Are you seriously considering moving 3,000 miles away for a job? For my career. For the future, she corrected. For our family, too. Our family is needed here and now, he said sharply. Theo is needed here and now. Riley felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had expected a difficult conversation, but hearing this still hurt. I'm not going to leave Theo. I thought maybe I'd move in on my own first, get settled in, and then you could join me. Jason snorted. You hear yourself, right? I have a job here. We have a home, friends, a whole life. Making us move to Seattle just because you liked it. It's selfish, Riley. Selfish? She asked bitterly, tears welling up in her eyes. Selfish to want to be realized? It's selfish to abandon your family for this, he snapped. Riley covered her face with her hands. I don't want to leave my family. I want you to come with me. I'm not going to Seattle, Jason said firmly. I have a good job here that I worked hard for. Theo's starting school soon, and our parents are here. You're asking me to give it all up. I'm not asking anyone to quit. Riley raised her voice. This is an opportunity. If I give up now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Don't you understand? I only understand that you are ready to risk our marriage, he said quietly, because what else can you call it? She shook her head. No, I thought you would support me. At least try. Jason stood up and walked around the room, trying to cope with his emotions. You leave me no choice, Riley. If you go, how will we live? On different coasts? This is not a marriage, but some kind of torture. I hoped it was temporary, but then, he smiled bitterly. Then you might not want to come back. You'll find a new life there, and I'm supposed to sit and wait. Don't say that. She whispered, but deep down she was afraid that he was right, there might be no way back. He stopped opposite her, looking straight into her eyes. If you leave, Riley, I don't know if we can survive it. A lump formed in my throat and tears ran down my cheeks. Please understand, I need to try this. I feel like otherwise I'll suffocate here. Jason lowered his head. And I feel like our family is falling apart right now. He ran his hand over his face and sighed heavily. When is the interview? In 3 weeks, she whispered. Sure. They were silent for a minute. Finally, Jason asked hoarsely, What will you tell Theo? Riley cringed. This was something she had been trying not to think about until the very end. I'll say that Mom is leaving to work in another city. For how long? He stared, unblinking. You don't know. 6 months? A year? Forever. The word forever hung in the air like a blow. She tried to object. Not forever. I hope you can come to me later, or I will come often. Jason exhaled, barely containing his disappointment. How can you say this so easily? He turned away, looking out the window at the dark courtyard. Easy? You think it's easy for me? Riley's voice broke. I just can't help it. I've tried to be a good wife, a mother, to forget about my ambitions. But I'm unhappy, Jace. And maybe that's why I haven't been a good mother either. Does Theo need someone unhappy, always upset, around him? He needs his mother nearby, he answered quietly. Just nearby. The words pierced her. Riley closed her eyes, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. We'll be there, just a little differently. She no longer believed her own words. Jason smiled bitterly. A little differently. What do you mean? Via video link? With holiday cards? Don't, she said pleadingly. Please, don't now. He clenched his fists, but remained silent. That night, they went to bed with their backs to each other. Little Theo breathed peacefully in his room, unaware of the storm that had passed through his parents' hearts. The decision had been made, and they both knew it. 3 weeks later, Riley left for an interview, got a job in Seattle as a junior UX designer at a startup. Returning home with a contract in hand, she packed her things. The day of their farewell in Rochester was gloomy. A taxi was waiting outside, 2 suitcases in the trunk. Theo was crying, his face buried in her lap, not understanding why his mother had to leave. Riley was stroking his back, telling him she loved him more than life itself and would be visiting soon. Jason stood nearby, his lips pressed grimly together, ready to take his son when the time came. He barely spoke to her in those last hours, afraid, it seemed, of losing his temper or saying something irreparable. "Honey, it's time for you to go," Riley's mother said quietly from the doorway. She had come to support her daughter, even though she didn't approve of her choice. Riley hugged her son tightly one last time. "You'll be a good boy, do you hear me? I'll call you every day. I love you very much, Theo." "I love you," the boy sobbed. "Mom, don't go." Riley felt like she was going to burst into tears, but she tried to hold on for her son's sake. She carefully handed him to Jason. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw the pain and cold distance in her husband's eyes. "Take care of him," she whispered. "And you take care of yourself," he answered quietly. She got into the taxi and looked back to see Theo reaching out to her, crying in his father's arms. The door slammed shut, cutting off all sound. As the car drove away, Riley watched her family grow smaller. At that moment, she felt like her heart was breaking in two. But she was determined not to cry. Ahead of her was Seattle, a new job, and what she believed was a bright future for all of them. The first months in Seattle passed like a vivid dream for Riley. Just yesterday, she was living in quiet Rochester, and today she woke up in a noisy city of skyscrapers and ancient wooden piers. In the morning, she was awakened not by her son's scream from the next room, but by the alarm clock on her smartphone and the muffled hum of city traffic outside the window. Her rented apartment turned out to be a tiny studio in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood in Seattle. One room combined with a kitchen, old parquet floors, and a view of the brick wall of the neighboring house, but inexpensive by local standards. Riley didn't mind. She felt like she was part of a big adventure. Here it was, an independent life in the city of her dreams. Every weekday, she rushed to the startup office, where she was hired as a junior UX designer. The office was located in a modern co-working space with panoramic windows on the 7th floor. It always smelled of freshly brewed coffee. The free coffee machine became a salvation for Riley after almost sleepless nights. There were many tasks. She had to learn new things quickly, but she enjoyed every minute. Her colleagues, young, passionate guys, welcomed her warmly. No one knew that she had family on the East Coast. Here she was just Riley Brown, a promising designer from nowhere who was ready to work late. After work, she and her colleagues would often stop by the bar on the corner. Riley smiled as she recalled how long it had been since she had gone out into society. At first, she was embarrassed. She was out of the habit of noisy companies and small talk, but soon she got into it. She liked feeling like part of a youthful crowd, laughing at jokes about the oddities of her clients, discussing the latest films and games. At 27, she seemed to be reliving her youth, lost due to her early family. In the evenings, walking home along the streets lit by shop windows, Riley felt euphoric. She walked lightly, without a stroller, without grocery bags or children's backpacks. Music of her own choosing played in her headphones, not the opening credits of children's cartoons. At such moments, a feeling of freedom overwhelmed her. It seemed that she was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. Of course, there were difficult moments. Every time she walked into the empty apartment, she found herself looking for her son's familiar voice or expecting to see his toys on the floor. At first, she called home often. On weekends, she and Theo video chatted. The boy showed her his new drawings, told her about kindergarten. He still asked when she would be back. Riley answered every time, "Soon, love, I'll be there as soon as I can." Jason also contacted her. Sometimes he sent photos, once letting his mother, who was helping with Theo, talk to Riley. Everyone was polite but distant. Calls like these would make Riley sad. She missed her son, especially his hugs before bed and his funny questions about nothing. She would wake up in the night in a panic, thinking she was late picking him up from daycare, before remembering she was in another city, and her son was now 1,000 miles away with his father. Then she would lie awake for a long time, comforting herself with the thought that it was all worth it. She would repeat, "I'm doing this for us, for him too." She imagined how one day she would give Theo a tour of Seattle, how proud he would be of her. Things were looking up at work. A couple of months after the move, Riley was given a small project of her own to work on, designing the interface for an internal app. She sat late into the night, carefully sketching out each screen. Her diligence was noticed by her superiors. At the end of the quarter, she was even praised at a meeting, noting the new employee's progress. Riley was beaming with pride. She hadn't felt such recognition in a long time. Over time, life in Seattle took on its own regular features. In the mornings, Riley would run to the local coffee shop around the corner. The barista already knew her favorite caramel latte. On Fridays, colleagues would organize board games right in the office after work, over pizza and beer, and she was happy to join. On weekends, she explored the city. She went to Pike Place Market, where she bought a souvenir for Theo, a jar of jam with Northwest berries. She walked in Kerry Park, photographing the bay and the silhouette of the Space Needle on the horizon. On days like these, she wished her son was nearby. He would surely be happy with a ferry ride or a view from the tower. Several times she started to text Jason with an offer to bring Theo to visit during the holidays, but she never sent it. She was afraid of his reaction. Too little time had passed, and she herself was still settling in. By the end of her first 6 months in Seattle, Riley found herself crying less and less at night. She was lonely, yes. She felt it especially keenly when she saw families with children in the parks. But she pushed away her regrets. Just a little more and everything will be fine, she thought. She believed that she was laying the foundation for a better life. That sooner or later Jason would soften, understand her. That her son, when he grew up, would be proud of her courage. The euphoria of her new life gave her strength. She signed up for local design communities and started going to meetups based on her interests. At one of these events, in an evening at a cafe, for the first time in a long time, she laughed coquettishly at the jokes of a stranger, a handsome developer she had met there. It was innocent, but unexpectedly pleasant to feel like a young woman and not just a mother and wife. She exchanged contacts with him, promising to meet at an exhibition sometime. Riley caught a glimpse of herself in the window as she rode home in a taxi that night, looking out at the lights of Seattle. Her eyes were bright with excitement, her cheeks flushed. She barely recognized the happy, uninhibited woman as her old self, the jaded mother she had left Rochester to care for. And while part of her missed home, the other part, the one that was now singing along to the music playing on the car radio, was happy. Happy with every day in the new city, with every discovery. Wasn't that a sign that she had done the right thing? December has been an especially rainy month in Seattle. Torrential rains fell almost daily. Short days gave way to long, twilight evenings. On this December day, Riley felt like the darkness had come early. Her heart was dark, too. Today was Theo's 6th birthday, the first birthday she had ever missed. In the morning, she mailed a package to Rochester, a gift for Theo, hoping the courier would arrive by evening. A large Lego set, the kind he had dreamed of, a card with congratulations. She carefully signed it, "From Mom with Love," and included a recent photo of herself in front of the Space Needle, smiling, so her son would know she was okay. After work, late at night in New York, she called to congratulate him in person. The phone screen lit up, a video call. There was Theo's face. It seemed he had grown even bigger, becoming more serious. Jason leaned over next to him. Part of a strange woman's face was visible on his shoulder. Riley squinted. The woman immediately moved away, not getting completely into the frame. Her heart sank. Who was that with him? But there was no time to find out. Theo joyfully shouted. "Mother, happy birthday, my dear," Riley replied, forcing herself to smile. "You're a big boy now." "Thank you. Mom, when are you coming?" the son blurted out. She swallowed. "I'll try soon, dear. I wish I could be with you now." "They made us a dinosaur cake," Theo boasted, his cheeks clearly covered in cream. "And also," he turned to Jason as if asking permission and continued, "and Miss Bethany gave me a book about space." Riley felt a chill inside. "Miss Bethany? A book? Who, who is it, Miss Bethany?" she asked, trying to sound calm. Jason leaned slightly toward the camera and answered evenly. "The school psychologist I was talking about. She helped with the preparations for the holiday." "I see." Riley tried to smile again. That was very sweet of her. "Mom," Theo called again, "and the gift you sent, when will it arrive?" "Soon, darling, I sent it. It should be here any minute now. You'll like it, I promise." "Lego?" The son's eyes lit up. Riley laughed. "You'll see. Deal?" He nodded. Then, hesitating, he added quietly, "Mom, it's a pity you're not here." Riley's heart sank, and the lump in her throat grew hard. "I'm sorry too, honey. I love you so much, and I miss you." She touched the screen with her fingers as if she could stroke it. "I love you too," the boy whispered. Jason appeared in the frame again, smiling at his son. "It's time to say goodbye, Theo. Mom needs to rest. It's already late," he said softly. The boy waved his hand reluctantly. "Bye, Mommy." "Bye, my dear. Happy birthday again." The connection was cut off. The screen went black, revealing Riley's tear-stained face. There was a scream in her throat. She threw the phone on the couch and burst into tears, burying her face in the pillow. The pain was unbearable. She was not where she was supposed to be on this day. And then there was this woman, Bethany, a psychologist, so she was probably young. Why was she with Jason during the holiday? How long had she been gone, and life there went on without her? Someone else was baking a cake, giving presents to her son. After an hour of fruitless attempts to calm down, Riley decided to leave the house. It felt stuffy within four walls. She threw on a raincoat and walked wherever her eyes looked just to avoid sitting in silence. Cold rain hit her face with small needles, mixing with tears. Soaking wet, she reached a familiar bar where she went with colleagues. A bright neon sign, barrel, and brew promised to distract from melancholy. There was music playing and a crowd of people inside. No one was paying attention to her, and thank God for that. Riley plopped down on a high stool at the bar. "Whiskey, please," she threw to the bartender, without even taking off her wet coat. The first sip burned her throat, but brought long-awaited warmth. Her head was buzzing with emotions. She wanted to forget at least for the evening. "Riley?" A surprised voice came from the side. She turned around. Mark was standing at the counter, the same developer they had met at the meetup a couple of months ago. Tall, with a dark beard and kind brown eyes. He smiled. "Hi, what a meeting. Are you alone?" "Mark." "Hi," she forced a smile. "Yes, alone." "Can I join you?" He pointed to an empty chair nearby. "Of course," she nodded. The bartender brought Mark a beer, and Riley was already ordering a second whiskey. Her head was starting to buzz with a pleasant fog. "Did something happen?" Mark asked, noticing her red eyes. She waved her hand. "Just a hard day." "At work?" "In life," she answered briefly, taking a sip. "Today is my son's birthday." "Oh," he raised his eyebrows, surprised by her confession. "You have a son?" Riley nodded. She usually kept her family secret, but she had no strength to hide it now. "He's 6, and he's not here in another city," she explained. "He's celebrating without me." "I'm so sorry," Mark said quietly. "It must be hard." "Yes," she looked away. "I chose this path myself, but It's not easy. Mark nodded understandingly. They were silent for a moment, only the music humming around them. After a minute, he asked cautiously, "Maybe you want to tell me about him? What's his name?" Riley smiled a little through her tears. "Theo. He is a wonderful boy, kind, smart. He loves dinosaurs and space." "Theo, that's a beautiful name," Mark responded. "You know, I'm sure he misses you just as much." "He misses me," she sighed, "but that doesn't make it any easier." Mark slightly covered her hand with his palm. "I'm really sorry, but you were able to talk to him, weren't you?" "Yes," she nodded, feeling the warmth of his hand. "But it's not that. It's not that." Eyes filled with tears again, Mark said softly, "Hey, not here. Let's go sit at the table in the corner, quieter." He paid for the drinks and carefully led her through the crowd to a free, semi-dark table in the corner of the bar. They talked for a long time there. Riley suddenly spilled almost her entire story about how she left her son for a dream, how she felt torn in half. Whiskey loosened his tongue and softened his caution. Mark listened attentively, without interrupting. Only occasionally did he ask questions: how long had this been going on, whether she communicated with her family. She saw no condemnation in his eyes, only sympathy and warm interest. The clock hands had moved noticeably toward midnight, when the conversation shifted from heavy topics to something lighter. Mark told her about himself. He had moved to Seattle from Denver and was working on a gaming platform. He joked about his failures in the kitchen, and she laughed, sincerely, for the first time that evening. The alcohol spread through her body in a pleasant wave. "Thank you," Riley said suddenly, looking at Mark. "I didn't think I'd say that. I must have had too much to drink." "It's okay," he smiled. "Sometimes you just need someone to listen." Riley nodded. The music was softer in the dim corner, creating a cozy background. Mark sat close, their knees almost touching. She caught the faint scent of his cologne, a warm, woodsy scent. She suddenly wanted to feel like a woman again, not just a failed mother, but a woman who was interesting to a man. Perhaps it was the desire for warmth and closeness, fueled by the alcohol, that pushed her. She leaned forward slightly. "Mark." He looked straight into her eyes. "Yes." Riley froze, trying to figure out if she was doing the right thing. "Stop thinking," her inner voice whispered. She pulled herself closer and brushed her lips against his. The kiss was soft and careful. Mark didn't pull away, on the contrary. He responded, lightly touching her cheek with his palm. Her heart began to beat rapidly. An image of Jason, Theo, flashed through her head. But Riley pushed it away, deepening the kiss. At that moment, she just wanted to forget. The rest was a blur. They left the bar, Mark offering to walk her home. The rain picked up outside, and they ran, laughing, under his jacket. At her door, Riley didn't want the night to end. She invited him up, her voice shaking. The apartment was dark and quiet. As soon as the door closed, they were suddenly overcome with passion, now that they were alone. Riley greedily sought his lips, throwing off her wet coat. Mark put his arm around her, whispering, "Are you sure?" She just nodded and pulled him deeper into the apartment. They spent the night together. Riley barely slept, either from the alcohol or the overwhelming emotions. She lay half asleep on Mark's chest, listening to the raindrops tapping on the windowsill, and struggled with contradictions. She felt good and hurt at the same time. It feels good because there is a warm body nearby, because she feels needed and desired. It hurts because she knows that this closeness is forbidden, that 1,000 miles away there is a husband whom she has betrayed. In the early morning, when the first gray rays of light crept through the curtains, Riley carefully climbed out of bed. Mark was sleeping, breathing peacefully. She looked at his calm face and felt a wave of guilt. Everything that had happened now seemed like a terrible mistake. In the bathroom, she quietly closed the door and turned on the water so she wouldn't have to hear her own sobs. Looking at her bruised, mascara-smeared face in the mirror, Riley whispered, "What have I done?" Traitor, deceiver, she barely recognized herself. Mark woke up when she came out of the bathroom, throwing on a robe. He sheepishly offered to make coffee. Riley gratefully declined, citing an early call. She wanted to be alone as soon as possible. They said an awkward goodbye at the door. Mark seemed to be hoping for more, asking if they would see each other again. Riley did not give a direct answer. She closed the door, leaned her back against it, and covered her face with her hands. In that quiet, gray morning silence, she clearly understood. No matter how things turned out, the old life could not be returned. After that fateful night, Riley felt like something between her and her home was starting to crumble. The weight of betrayal weighed on her every minute. When she woke up in the morning, the first thing she did was remember what had happened and felt a sickening sense of guilt. She avoided Mark, politely responded to one of his messages that she was busy, and then did not contact him again. But it was impossible to erase what had happened from her memory. Jason soon noticed the change. He called her himself because she was less likely to initiate it. A week ago, they had agreed that Riley would fly to Rochester for Christmas to see Theo. But now the very thought of meeting her husband in person made her panic. How could she look him in the eye, knowing that she had cheated on him? What excuse could she give him for saying no? 2 weeks before the holidays, she called herself it was morning in Seattle, afternoon in Rochester. Jason was surprised by the unscheduled call. "Hello? Is everything okay?" "Hey, listen, Jace," she began hesitantly. "I've got a force majeure situation at work. The project is on fire. The deadline is at the end of the year." She closed her eyes for a second, realizing how pathetic her lies sounded. "So what?" he asked warily. "And I won't be able to come for Christmas," she breathed. "Please forgive me." There was silence on the line. Finally, Jason answered dryly. "It's clear. I'm so sorry. I wanted it myself, but they won't let me. New client, they make me work all weekend." She chattered, hoping her voice wouldn't waver. "Theo will be upset," he said quietly. "I know. I'll try to fly in later for his spring break, I promise." "You promise." He smiled bitterly. "Okay, Riley. What can I say? You're angry." He fell silent, then quietly added, "I'm tired of explaining things to the child. Will you tell him yourself or me?" Riley closed her eyes, imagining the disappointment on her son's face. "I'll tell you myself, of course. Later, when I collect my thoughts. Don't delay." He's waiting, counting the days. At these words, Jason's voice broke. He quickly said goodbye and hung up. Riley lowered the phone. Tears burned her eyes, but they brought no relief. She had lied to him, the first time she had ever lied like that, and she knew the trust was beginning to crack. In the days that followed, the calls became short and infrequent. Riley always felt as if Jason was suspicious, although it was more likely that she herself could not act as she had before. Every now and then, there was a note of hurt and coldness in his voice. Theo felt the tension too. When Riley called to wish him a Merry Christmas, the boy barely smiled. He said quietly, "I was waiting for you, Mom," and these words completely broke her heart. She mumbled an apology, citing work, but the little boy only shrugged. The conversation did not go well. Theo, usually inquisitive, answered in monosyllables. A few minutes later, he ran off to show his new toy to his grandfather, and Riley was left talking to Jason. "He's very upset," the husband said dryly. "I understand," she whispered. "Do you understand?" Jason's voice was barely restrained by the anger. "This is the second time you've let him down." "Second, it's his birthday now," he reminded me. "He's a child, waiting for his mother, and you cancel at the last minute." Riley was silent, biting her lips until they hurt. "I tried my best to arrange a holiday for him, but I can't replace my mother," he continued harshly. "I'm sorry," was all she could squeeze out. "Sorry, I have to go," he said, cutting off the conversation. "We have guests coming. Merry Christmas, Riley." The receiver clicked. After that incident, the calls were increasingly initiated by relatives from Rochester. Sometimes Riley's mother would call, worried about why her daughter had not arrived. Riley would justify herself with work and poor health, feeling herself sinking deeper into a swamp of lies. When Jason called, the conversation was dry and concerned only Theo's affairs, how his day had gone, what the doctor had said at his routine checkup, whether he needed to send money. Riley sent part of her salary every month to Jason for his son, and this was almost her only parental function at a distance. Sometimes she tried to call Theo herself, but often came across voicemail. The time difference and her son's daily routine did their job. She missed the moments when he was free, and there was a feeling that Jason sometimes simply did not pick up the phone, knowing who was calling. Maybe he was tired of being an intermediary. One evening, a couple of months after Christmas, Riley finally found her son on the phone. His voice was distant. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hi, darling." She tried to sound cheerful. "How are you? What did you do today?" "At school, they told me to draw a family," Theo said. "Really? Who did you draw?" Riley asked softly. "Dad, myself." The boy fell silent. "I also drew Grandma." Riley became wary. "What about Mom?" There was silence on the line. Then the son answered evasively. "I didn't have time to draw you." The teacher took the drawing. Riley's heart sank in pain. "I see. It's okay. You'll draw it next time," she squeezed out, trying to hide the trembling in her voice. "Uh-huh," was all Theo said. The conversation didn't go well again. Theo seemed distant, as if he was offended or had forgotten how to talk to her. He answered all the questions briefly. How were his studies? Who did he play with? Finally, he called his dad. "Mom, can Dad speak to me?" He promised to turn on a cartoon for me after the call. "Sure, tell him," Riley whispered, feeling unwanted. Jason picked up the phone. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," Riley replied. "Theo's been feeling kind of shorted." "Yes, I noticed," he answered coldly. "I think he just has nothing to say to you." "What? Why?" She was taken aback. "Because you're not around, Riley," Jason blurted out suddenly, irritated. "He's getting used to life without you." Riley's breath caught at those words. "Don't talk like that." "How?" Jason raised his voice. "How do I tell him? You're disappearing from his life, you understand." She choked on tears. I try, really." "Not enough," he snapped. "You know, lately I've been thinking that it's even better for him this way." "Better off without a mother?" Riley gasped. "Better without disappointments," he answered sharply. "There's more stability, you understand?" Stability. Again, this word cuts to the heart. Riley closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Jason, please." "What?" he asked tiredly. She wanted to say, "Give me a chance to fix everything." But she kept silent, realizing that she was not ready to fix anything yet. She was confused. "It's nothing," she whispered. "Then I have to go," he said evenly. "I need to put him to bed. Bye, Riley." The call ended. After that conversation, Riley sat for a long time, staring blankly at the wall. Jason's words burned her soul. "He's getting used to life without you. There's more stability." She left, and her son and husband tried to continue their lives as best they could, and it seemed to be working. The thought of Theo learning to cope without his mother's love was unbearable. It was becoming increasingly difficult to justify herself. When she left, she believed she was doing the best. But what good was it for a little boy to feel abandoned? Riley wanted to fix it, but she didn't know how. Every call was a struggle, forcing herself to press the call button because she felt like she had no right to be called a mother anymore. She had cheated on her husband, deceived him, and failed her son. The pain and guilt paralyzed her, making her avoid communication even more, closing the vicious circle. Months passed like this. The calls grew shorter and shorter, and then almost ceased altogether. By summer, the only contact was through occasional text messages and the occasional photo of Theo that Jason sent at his request. Technically, Riley was still part of the family on paper. She was a wife and a mother, but inside, she already felt rejected. It was July. The Seattle heat was unusually muggy. Riley was driving home from work late one evening when her phone vibrated in her bag. Jason's name appeared on the screen. They hadn't spoken in weeks, not since that last argument about the family drawing. Her heart leapt into her throat. She stopped in the park on her way home, and sat on a bench under a tree, trying to stop her fingers from shaking before answering. "Hello," she said carefully. "Hi." Jason's voice was hoarse and tense. "We need to talk." Riley shook with anxiety. Was something wrong with Theo? "What happened? Is Theo okay?" she blurted out. "Theo." Jason sighed. "He's fine. This is about us." Riley closed her eyes. There it was. "I'm listening," she whispered. "Riley, this can't go on," he began after a pause. "We don't really talk. You don't come over. We don't know what's going on with each other. This isn't a family anymore." Every word cut to the quick, but he was right. She remained silent, knowing he was waiting for an answer. "I know," she finally squeezed out. "I tried." His voice faltered, and he trailed off. "Anyway, we need to decide how to live on. Maybe we should formalize our separation." The word official hung in the air. He was talking about divorce, Riley realized. Her heart sank. She should have expected it, but tears came to her eyes anyway. "If that's what you want," she said quietly. Jason smiled sadly. "What else is there to do? You yourself distanced yourself. I don't know what's going on there, but you clearly don't care about us." This was the moment of truth. She couldn't lie anymore. There was no point. The circle was complete. "Jason," she began, her voice shaking. "You're right. I'm guilty." "It's not about the accusations," he said wearily. "It's about what happens next. Theo's growing up. He needs certainty." Riley took a deep breath. Confessing now would destroy the last threads, but they were hanging by a thread. He needed to know the truth. "It's also about the accusations," she said bitterly, "because I did something unforgivable." There was a wary silence on the other end of the line. Jason didn't interrupt. Riley felt her insides twist with horror and shame, but she continued. "I cheated on you." These words seemed alien. She said them quietly, in a breaking voice. Silence. She heard only the beating of her own heart and the distant noise of the city fountain. "What?" he finally asked quietly, as if he hadn't heard. "I slept with someone else," she said clearly, each word painfully. "Once, in the winter." There was only heavy breathing on the other end. Then Jason seemed to cover the phone, a muffled sound like he was exhaling or cursing to the side. Riley waited for the verdict, afraid to say a word, her heart pounding, her fingers numb from clutching the phone. Finally, Jason's voice came again, hoarse and broken. "Why are you telling me this now? I can't hide it anymore," she whispered through her tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Jace." She burst into tears, unable to contain herself. The line was silent. Was he listening to her crying, or was he simply silent in shock? "It's..." He paused, breathing heavily. "It's with that. Someone in Seattle?" "Yes," she breathed out. "A colleague, an acquaintance. It doesn't matter. It was one time." "Once," he repeated dully, as if tasting the words. "And then what?" "Nothing. I cut him off right away. I felt disgusted with myself." "I see," he said after a pause, but there was no understanding in his voice, only emptiness. Several agonizing seconds passed. Then Jason said slowly, as if forcing it out of himself. "You know what's most offensive? It's not even that you cheated. It's that it seems like you don't care anymore." "No," Riley cried. "It does matter. I love you. I'm just confused. He interrupted, anger evident in his voice. "Do you love it? That's not how you love, Riley. You don't leave or cheat on those you love." She had nothing to say in response. He was right. "You're right," she whispered desperately. "I did something disgusting. I understand everything." Jason smiled bitterly. "You see, what is there to understand?" Silence again. Then he asked very quietly, "Do you love him? This guy?" "No, no, of course not," she answered quickly. "It was a mistake. I didn't have feelings for him. Just slept with her for fun." His voice was icy. "I was lonely, drunk. That's no excuse, I know." She tried to explain haltingly. I missed you, missed us, and I lost it. Missed, he chuckled again, but there were tears in his voice. Strange way to miss. Riley's feelings became completely unbearable. She quietly sobbed. I have nothing to say in my defense. I just wanted you to know the truth. Because you deserve the truth. Jason was silent for a long time. Finally, he exhaled. Okay, it's true, so be it. Thanks for telling me. His words pierced her formal, cruel in their detachment. Jace, she began, but he interrupted. What? Sorry? Do you want forgiveness? Riley fell silent. She knew there was no point in asking for forgiveness. I don't know what I want, she admitted barely audibly. I guess I wanted to get rid of this burden. Well, congratulations, he said bitterly. I took it off. Now it's on me. She burst into tears again. I'm so sorry. I heard already, he answered wearily. Okay, Riley, I can't right now. He didn't finish. For a few seconds there was no sound, then barely audible. I have to think. Of course. Yes, of course, she whispered. I'll call when I'm ready to talk, he said quietly. Take care. These words sounded automatic, like someone else's politeness. And you. She began, but the line had already died. Riley sat on the bench, her phone dropped onto her lap. Her legs gave out. The evening park was emptying, the street lights were on, and she was still crying, covering her face with her hands. It was all over. Her husband knew, and now he definitely hated her, or worse, despised her. Jason didn't call the next day or the week after. No response. Riley sent him long emails, filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness, for the sake of their son, for the sake of everything they had. He didn't respond. Just a quick message 2 weeks later. I'll pick up the official papers when they're ready. It's best that way. Like a knife in the heart, it will be better this way. Better for whom? Probably for him and Theo. Of course, they are better off without her lies and pain. It seemed that she had already disappeared from the lives of Jason and her son, remaining only on paper. After the confession, all she could do was watch from afar and wait for at least some kind of solution. Several months had passed since the confession. The Seattle fall had been long and cold, as had the feeling inside Riley. There had been no response from Jason, other than the aforementioned papers. She realized that he was preparing to file for divorce and possibly sole custody of Theo. The thought terrified her, but she didn't know how to fight it. In October, Riley couldn't take it anymore. She decided to fly to Rochester, at least briefly, to see her son and try to talk to her husband face to face. Without warning, knowing she was unlikely to be expected, but hoping that seeing her in front of him would soften Jason just a little. The plane landed on a cool, overcast day. Riley hailed a cab and drove down familiar streets to the house that had once been hers. Along the way, she bought a bouquet of chrysanthemums, her mother-in-law's favorite flowers, in case she was there, and a small Lego set for Theo. Her hands shook as the cab turned onto their street. There was a strange blue car parked outside Jason's house. No one was on the porch. Riley paid the driver and took a deep breath as she walked up the steps. Her heart was pounding. She rang the doorbell. The door opened after a few agonizing seconds. Jason stood there. He froze when he saw her. Riley, he blurted out. His eyes were genuinely surprised, his eyebrows raised. He clearly hadn't expected to see her. Hello, she said quietly, trying to smile. I just arrived. There was an awkward silence. Jason glanced at her. She was clutching a bouquet and a gift, a duffel bag over her shoulder. He still hadn't stepped back, blocking the entrance. Why? He finally exhaled. I want to see Theo. To talk to you, she replied pleadingly. Can I come in? Jason hesitated, but eventually stepped aside. Okay? Just for a little while. Riley stepped through the door and froze. Everything was painfully familiar. Theo's jacket on the coat rack in the hallway, her favorite rug by the door. And yet, at the same time, it was foreign. New framed photos on the nightstand that she hadn't seen before. One showed Theo with his school backpack, Jason next to him, and a woman with brown hair holding the boy's hand on his shoulder. Riley recognized the voice from the video, the same school counselor, Bethany. The photo hit her in the gut. "Is this all of you together?" She couldn't help but ask, pointing at the frame. Jason looked and frowned. Yeah, this is from a school picnic a couple of weeks ago. Bethany helped out a lot, and we took pictures afterwards." He closed the door. "She's here now, by the way." Footsteps approached from the living room, and a woman appeared on the threshold, the same one from the photo. A pleasant face, a slightly embarrassed smile. "Hi," Bethany said quietly, looking from Jason to the guest. "You must be Riley." "Yes," Riley breathed out, confused. "Hello." "We've known each other in absentia," Bethany smiled warmly. "I'm Theo's school psychologist." Riley nodded, feeling unwelcome. Jason coughed. "Beth, can you keep Theo busy for now? He's in his room." "Of course," the woman smiled understandingly and disappeared into the depths of the house. Left with Riley, Jason awkwardly suggested, "We can talk outside or on the veranda." "Let's do it on the veranda," she agreed, feeling that it was hard for her to be in the house. They walked out onto the back porch where they had once had tea in the evenings. The autumn chill was chilly. Riley pulled up the sleeves of her sweater. "I didn't expect you to come," Jason began, looking at the withered flower beds in the yard. "I know, but I had to," she said quietly. "I couldn't do it anymore from a distance without finding out anything." "Find out what?" he asked wearily. "What do we do next?" Riley replied. "Jace, I know I ruined everything, but I'm still Theo's mom. I want to see him, to be involved in his life somehow." Jason gripped the porch railing, silent. She continued quickly. "I could go back to Rochester, find a job here. Maybe somehow, at least for our son's sake, can we establish communication?" He turned to face her, a mixture of pain and determination frozen on his face. "Riley, it's late." "Don't say that, please." She looked into his eyes pleadingly. "I know I betrayed you, but Theo, for him." "For him, yes," Jason interrupted. "Because for him, I can't let you turn this upside down again." "I don't want to turn it over. I want to fix it." "Fix it?" He shook his head. "You can't fix what you've done." He sighed, trying to find his words. "Look, these last 2 years have been really hard, especially for Theo. But now, it's finally getting easier." Riley tensed. "Easier." "He's adjusted. He has a routine, stability," Jason said firmly. "His psyche has only just calmed down. Bethany has a lot to do with that." Riley's heart sank at the woman's name, but she remained silent. Jason continued. "I don't know how much more pain you can cause him. You yourself. Appear and disappear." "I understand," she whispered. "But I'm ready to change, to be there all the time." "Permanently?" He smiled bitterly. "How? You'll come back and live here, in the same city as us?" "If necessary, yes," Riley nodded. "I'll rent a place nearby and visit on schedule." "On schedule." Jason looked away. "Understand, Theo has already gotten used to living without you every day. If you burst in now and disappear again, it will only get worse." "I won't disappear," she said hotly. "Give me a chance to prove it." Jason looked into her eyes intently. "And if you work again, will you leave again?" "How should I know?" "I won't leave," she shook her head. "I realized that family is more important than career. I realized it too late, but—" He raised his hand, stopping. "Words, words, Riley. I've heard so many of them." She swallowed. "The most important thing for Theo right now is stability," Jason said clearly. "He needs a calm, understandable life, without upheavals, without endless goodbyes." "I agree," she quickly responded, "and I want to give him stability too." "Can you?" He looked at her doubtfully. "You decided, and then in 6 months you'll change your mind?" "No." She shook her head, feeling like she was losing ground again. "I've thought it all through." Jason sighed. Understand, I can't risk his mental health for the sake of your hesitation. It's not hesitation, she began, but he continued firmly. As a father, I have to provide him with the best conditions. Now he has a home, school, friends, and my support. Plus Bethany as a mentor. He stopped waking up at night, stopped drawing sad pictures. Riley closed her eyes, imagining her boy drawing something sad. I'm glad he's better, she said quietly. But let me be a part of his life, even if only a little. Jason clenched his jaw, fighting his emotions. I'm not against communication, he finally said. But let's be honest, the main responsibility will be on me. You will see him, but he will live with me. Riley covered her face with her hands, tears choking her. Is it really? Is there really no chance to get everything back? Between us, he asked harshly. No, Riley, not after everything. She sobbed, nodding. I deserve it, I understand. This isn't about punishment, he said quietly. This is about the child. He doesn't need instability. The word came again, a heavy sentence. Riley dropped her hands and wiped her eyes. What do you suggest? Jason looked back at the house. I filed for divorce and sole custody, but I'm willing to have formal joint custody if you agree that he de facto lives with me and you are the visiting parent. Riley paled. It's almost like... It's as if you were his aunt who came to visit, he said sharply. Sorry, but that's how it is. You've become almost a stranger to him over the years. Don't say that, she begged. The truth hurts, he sighed. I won't stop you from seeing me, but I'll insist in court that I'm staying with you. And given the circumstances, you know, the chances of it being different are slim. Riley nodded. She could see the determination on his face. He had already made up his mind for them. She could either fight it in court or agree. If you go against it, he added more softly, it will drag on and hit Theo. There will be checks, psychologists. He doesn't need this persecution. Riley remembered the newsletter talking about stability and support. Was trying to get her son back, going to make things worse for him. I don't want to hurt him, she whispered. Then maybe it's better to hold off on personal meetings for now, Jason began hesitantly. We can do it by video. No, she suddenly interrupted firmly. No, I want to see him. That's why I came. Jason paused, then nodded. Okay, he's home, I'll ask Bethany. No, let me, Riley begged. He hesitated for a moment, then shouted through the open door. Bethany, let Theo come out, please. Bethany's voice was heard. Theo, you have a guest. Come to the porch. A minute later, Theo appeared on the threshold. The boy stopped warily when he saw his mother. Hey, sunshine, Riley whispered, stepping forward. Theo looked at her carefully. So much time had passed he had grown, changed. She didn't know whether to rush to hug him or wait. Mom, is that you? He asked uncertainly. It's me, darling, she sobbed and opened her arms. Theo slowly moved closer and let her hug him. He was tense at first, but then, feeling her tears on his cheek, he hugged her too. You arrived, he said quietly. Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry it's so late. Forgive me, Riley whispered, stroking his back. Jason stood nearby, his back turned, giving them a moment. Even Bethany was out of sight, apparently tactfully staying in the house. After a minute, Theo pulled back and asked seriously, Are you leaving again? Riley's throat tightened. She glanced sideways at Jason, then gathered her courage and replied, I need to get back to work, but I want to see you as often as possible. The boy nodded, looking down. I'll call, okay, and I'll come again, definitely. Do you promise? He asked quietly. Riley nodded, holding back tears. I promise, honey. Riley didn't stay long that day. She spent a couple of hours with Theo in the living room, building the construction set she'd brought. Bethany was there, sitting there at first, then quietly joining in, getting the shy Theo to talk. Riley could barely contain her morbid jealousy as she watched her mother get along so naturally with her son. But Bethany was careful not to outshine her mother. Riley gave her son another big hug as she said goodbye. Her heart felt like it was breaking when she let go of his hand in the car. Jason drove her back to the airport, barely speaking to her on the way. At the plane, he only said, "I will let you know when and where to come to court." She nodded, at a loss for words. "And thank you for being reasonable today," he added. "No scenes." Riley smiled bitterly. "After everything, I have neither the strength nor the right to go on stage." He nodded, looked at her with unspeakable sadness, and drove away, and she was left alone in the middle of a noisy airport, feeling absolutely empty. These few hours made it clear. There is no way back. There is only one thing left to do: formalize the new state of affairs, and try to preserve at least a small place in the life of his son without destroying the fragile balance that he has finally acquired. While Riley was weathering her storm in Seattle, life went on in Rochester. There, next to Jason and Theo, a woman gradually emerged as a quiet support: Bethany Wilson. Jason first met Bethany shortly after Riley failed to come home for Christmas. In January, Theo's school arranged a meeting between parents and a psychologist to discuss the adjustment of first graders. Theo had just started first grade, and the teacher noticed that the boy often seemed sad and distracted. Jason was offered a talk with a school counselor. He was nervous at the psychologist's office. He was not used to talking about personal matters with strangers. A young woman of about 30 opened the door with a friendly smile. "Mr. Brown." "Hello, I'm Bethany Wilson, the school psychologist." She shook his hand firmly, her gray eyes full of concern. They sat down in soft chairs in a cozy office with posters about emotions and a shelf of children's books. Theo was in class at the time, and Jason was free to discuss his son's problems. "I invited you because I'm worried about Theo," Bethany began softly. "He's a bright boy, but he's often seemed depressed lately. Tell me about the situation at home. Have there been any changes?" Jason exhaled heavily. "There were. His mother, my wife, left about a year ago. We are now living separately." Bethany nodded, looking at him sympathetically. "I'm very sorry. This is a big change for a child." "Yes," he looked down. "Theo misses his mother, although he tries not to show it." He told her how his mother called at first, then less and less. Bethany listened attentively, without interrupting, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. "I understand," she said quietly when he finished. "This is difficult for both of you." "I try my best." Jason rubbed his forehead with his palm. "But sometimes he asks questions I don't have answers to. For example, why isn't Mom with us? Doesn't she love me?" His voice broke. He didn't say it directly, but I feel. Bethany covered his clenched fist with her palm. "Children tend to blame themselves when their parents leave. It is very important to reassure Theo that his mother loves him and that it is not his fault that he left." Jason nodded. "That's what I'm saying. But he's still. It will take time," she said softly, "but with your support, he can handle it." They discussed some practical tips: keeping a routine, hugging their son more often, letting him express his sadness. Bethany suggested inviting Theo to one-on-one sessions to help him express his emotions through drawing or playing. "If you don't mind, I'll work with him from time to time," she said. "Of course, I don't mind. I'd be grateful," Jason answered sincerely. That's how their acquaintance began. Theo visited Bethany in her cozy office twice a week. They read books about feelings, drew dream families. Sometimes the boy withdrew and didn't want to talk, then Bethany simply played the silent game with him, letting him know that she was there. Gradually, Theo got used to it and opened up. He once whispered to her that he was angry with his mother, but was afraid to tell his father so as not to upset him. Bethany carefully shared these feelings with Jason at their next meeting. "It's normal," she explained. "He's hurt and upset that Mom is far away, but he's loyal to you and doesn't want to add to your pain." Jason listened, feeling both sadness and relief. At least his son wasn't keeping everything inside. Along the way, he and Bethany began exchanging personal phrases. After discussing Theo's affairs, Jason once asked how long she had been working at the school. She said it was her third year moved from California, and loved helping children. Another time, Bethany asked if he was coping at home alone and if he had help. Jason admitted that his parents lived an hour away, rarely visited, and he mostly relied on himself. "You need support too," she noted softly. He just shrugged. "The main thing is that everything is well with my son." In the spring, Bethany organized a support group at school for children from single-parent families. Theo went there and, according to Bethany, smiled more often there, seeing that he was not the only one. Jason thanked her every time for her attention to his son. He was impressed by her kindness and sensitivity. Gradually, their communication crossed the school threshold. One day, after a parent-teacher meeting, Jason offered to give Bethany a ride home. It was pouring rain, and her car was stuck at a service station. On the way, they started talking about little things, their favorite music. It turned out they both loved classic rock, about how Bethany had a hard time getting used to the winters in New York State. Jason caught himself feeling easy and calm with her. After a while, Bethany began dropping by their house occasionally, under the pretext of visiting Theo. The son was delighted. He adored Miss Bethany. She brought him books, baked cookies. One spring, Jason invited her to stay for dinner after such a visit. He was nervous, feeling as if he were on a first date, although officially it was just gratitude for caring for Theo. At the table, while Theo enthusiastically devoured macaroni casserole, he and Bethany talked about childhood movies. Jason laughed for the first time in a long time, sincerely. After that dinner, as he walked Bethany to the porch, he said, "You know, you do so much for my son. And for me, I really appreciate it." She smiled back. "You do a lot too. You are a great father." Their eyes met, and there was a pause. Bethany looked away first. "Well, thanks for the evening. I have to go." "Of course," he said, catching himself. "Be careful on the road." That night Jason couldn't sleep for a long time. Before his eyes stood the image of Bethany, her kind smile. By summer, their bond had grown even stronger. Bethany invited Jason and Theo to a school picnic for families in the park. She spent most of the day with them, helping Theo build a kite, laughing at his jokes. Some parents seemed to think she was Theo's mom. They looked like a family. Jason felt awkward at first, but then realized he didn't mind. After the picnic, he dared to invite her to the zoo with Theo on the weekend. They spent a wonderful day together. Theo held their hands in front of the giraffe enclosure, and Jason felt a lump in his throat from this scene. This is probably how their family should look, only instead of Bethany Riley. But thoughts about his wife, surprisingly, did not hurt him as much as before. He felt good here and now. By the beginning of the next school year, Bethany had become a close friend to Theo. The boy excitedly told his dad that Miss Bethany had taught him how to calm down when he was sad, and also showed him the secret of how to take care of the school flower. Jason could see his son was coming to life, and all thanks to this sympathetic woman. One October evening, when the leaves were glowing gold, Jason plucked up the courage to ask Bethany out on a real date without the kids. He had been rehearsing his pitch for a long time, but when she opened the door, he simply became embarrassed and blurted out, "Would you like to go out to a restaurant sometime, just the two of you?" Bethany was surprised, then happily agreed. And so their feelings began to grow. Quietly, cautiously, they were both afraid to hurt Theo or to rush. But little by little, Bethany became more than a school counselor. She became someone Jason could lean on, someone who accepted him and his son as a whole. When Jason's washing machine broke down and he called the service in a panic, Bethany offered to help by taking some of the laundry to wash at her place. When Theo developed a high fever at night, it was she who Jason called after the doctor, and she rushed over with a bag of oranges and a new toy to cheer him up. For the first time in a long time, laughter settled in the Browns' house, not longing and tension, but warmth and comfort. In the evenings, while putting his son to bed, Jason sometimes found himself thinking about what it would be like if Bethany stayed with them forever. Theo, too, seemed to be drawn to her with a special feeling. One day, Jason heard his son call Bethany Mom out of habit and froze. The boy immediately became embarrassed, But she did not lose her head. She smiled and said, "It's okay, I'm almost like your aunt." However, Jason realized that for the child, she was already more than just an acquaintance. So Bethany came into their lives, unobtrusively, carefully. When Riley suddenly showed up on the doorstep in the fall, their family was no longer the same. It had its own new way of life, part of which was the kind school counselor. And although Bethany tried to stay in the shadows so as not to displace the image of her mother in Theo's heart, Theo himself increasingly sought her hand or a supportive look. Bethany's arrival filled the void left by Riley's departure. Neither Jason nor little Theo had planned to replace their mother, but life itself gave them what they needed: care and stability from a woman who loved them both. A new weekend routine had emerged in the Brown household in late autumn. One November weekend, Bethany spent the night with Jason and Theo for the first time as a guest, although she felt almost like a member of the family. On Friday night after work, Jason brought her home. They had agreed to spend the weekend together, with plans to go to the movies and bake cookies at home. Theo was thrilled. He had been asking his dad all day when Miss Bethany would arrive. At first, Bethany was embarrassed. She insisted on sleeping in the guest room. Despite Jason quietly offering her his bedroom, he was ready to retire to the couch. "I'm fine here," she smiled, laying out her things on the neatly made couch. Jason understood her delicacy. They didn't want to rush things, and for Theo, for now, officially, she was just a good friend, a guest. On Saturday morning, Theo woke to the delicious smell of cinnamon. He slipped out of bed and ran barefoot to the kitchen. There, Bethany stood at the stove in a flowered apron, stirring something in a frying pan. A mountain of fluffy pancakes was already on the table. "Hey, sleepyhead," Bethany smiled at him, hearing the rustle. "You're just in time. First pancake for you." "Hi," Theo said happily. "Do you make pancakes?" "Yeah, the signature ones. With chocolate chips. Your dad said you like those." The boy climbed onto a stool, watching her with interest. He liked seeing Bethany at his house in the morning, as if it was meant to be. She deftly flipped a pancake, humming something under her breath. Footsteps sounded in the living room. It was Jason, standing up, drawn by the aromas. "Good morning," he said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. The sight of his son swinging his legs at the table and Bethany flipping pancakes with one hand made him smile. It was such a homey scene that Jason's heart sank with happiness. "Good morning," Bethany responded cheerfully. "The coffee is ready. Pour yourself some." "I love Saturdays," Theo said with his mouth full of pancakes, which made the adults laugh. "Be careful, you glutton," his father winked as he poured coffee. "Beth, you're spoiling us." "Okay, once a week is fine," she played along. The day went wonderfully. After breakfast, they went to the cinema to watch a cartoon. Theo sat in the middle, holding hands with both Dad and Bethany in the scary parts, and laughed with them at the funny moments. Then they walked through the autumn park, collecting a bouquet of multicolored fallen leaves. Bethany taught Theo how to make a rose bouquet from leaves by twisting them in a special way. The boy was delighted and took the gift to his grandmother when they stopped by Jason's parents for tea. In the evening, they all baked gingerbread cookies at home. The kitchen turned into a mini bakery. Flour, dough, stars, and people cut out with cookie cutters everywhere. Theo laughed when Jason made a scary person with a broken leg. Bethany put the baking sheet in the oven, wiping flour from the boy's cheeks. At some point, Theo, who was enthusiastically decorating the finished cookies with colored icing, suddenly blurted out, "It's so great that you came to visit us, Bethany." She smiled warmly. "I have fun with you too, Theo." "Will you come again?" he asked, drawing a zigzag on the cookie with green icing. Bethany glanced at Jason, then nodded. "If Dad invites me, then I think I'll come." "I'll invite you. Where else can I go?" Jason teased her playfully. Theo looked slyly at his father. "Dad, invite me more often." Everyone laughed. That night, while putting his son to bed, Jason noticed that Theo was clearly happy. The boy yawned and said, "I like it when Bethany visits us. She is kind." "Yes, she's wonderful," the father agreed, straightening the blanket. She's almost like Mom, Theo muttered sleepily, and then added, not quite, but that's okay, right? Jason's throat tightened. He stroked his son's hair. It's okay, my friend. I think your mom doesn't mind that you have such a good friend. Uh-huh. The boy's eyes were already closing. A couple of minutes later, he fell asleep, and Jason quietly came out and closed the door. In the living room, Bethany sat with a mug of tea, looking through the latest photos on her phone. They had taken a bunch of them today. In one, Theo was holding two cookies to his eyes like glasses. In another, he was laughing and hugging them both. Bethany smiled at these moments. Jason sat down next to him. Thank you for this weekend. He hasn't been this happy in a long time. She turned to him. You both haven't been happy for a long time. I'm happy that I could help. He took her hand gently. You have no idea how much you mean to us. Bethany blushed slightly and covered his hand with hers. I guess I can imagine, because you mean something to me too. He looked into her gray eyes and his chest warmed. He suddenly wanted to say so much more, but he just smiled and pulled her slightly closer. Bethany leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat there in silence, watching the late-night rain pound against the window. On Sunday evening, when it was time to say goodbye, Theo asked Bethany to stay longer. I'll come to school in a couple of days. We'll see each other there, okay? She coaxed, kissing the boy on the top of his head. Jason sat his son down to draw and walked Bethany to the car. On the porch, he hugged her tightly. Maybe soon this will not be a guest, but a permanent one. She smiled through the slight sadness of separation. Let's not rush. But I dream about it too. They kissed tentatively, briefly, a little shyly, knowing that Theo might be peeking through the curtain. Then Bethany got into her car and drove away into the gathering dusk. This weekend finally showed. Bethany had become a part of their lives, not formally as long as she remained a guest, but essentially a family member, and all three of them felt it. The custody hearing took place in January, on a dreary, gray day that reflected Riley's mood. The small family courtroom was nearly empty, just the judge, the clerk, and the two parties with their lawyers. Riley sat at the defendant's table, her fingers interlaced, her palms cold. Next to her was her lawyer, an older, quiet man her mother had recommended. At the other end was Jason and his lawyer, and in the background, watching, was Bethany. As the school psychologist, she had been allowed to give her opinion on the child's condition. Riley glanced at her husband. He was avoiding her gaze, his face focused and tense. Bethany, sitting behind her, was looking at Riley with gentle sympathy, but Riley couldn't accept it. She looked away. The hearing began. The judge, a stern woman of about 50, looked over the case materials. We are considering the custody of a minor, Theodore Brown, age 7. The plaintiff is the father, Jason Brown, and the defendant is the mother, Riley Brown. The father is seeking sole physical custody with visitation rights for the mother. The mother originally requested joint custody. Is that correct? The judge looked at Riley, who cleared her throat nervously. Your Honor, I will agree to the father's terms if it is for the good of the son. Her lawyer nodded softly, confirming. Yes, we no longer dispute the child's primary residence with the father. We only want to maintain regular contact with the mother. The judge nodded her head approvingly. It is commendable that you have come to an agreement. However, I should record some circumstances. And so the long, agonizing minutes began as her entire fall unfolded. Jason's lawyer laid out the facts. The mother had voluntarily abandoned the child 2 years earlier, moving to another state, visiting sporadically, and having had no contact for a long time. He mentioned, without going into detail, the inappropriate behavior that had caused the marriage to fall apart, a diplomatic reference to her infidelity. Riley felt as if each stroke were a hammer blow. She hung her head, shame burning in her cheeks. Riley's attorney tried to smooth things over. The mother had now realized her mistakes, had returned to Rochester, had a steady job. She had indeed found a job as a designer in a small firm and was willing to participate in raising the child. That depriving the child of its mother would be too cruel. He petitioned for a generous visitation schedule. The judge listened to both sides. Then Bethany Wilson was called as a witness. Riley tensed. Bethany walked confidently to the stand, swore an oath to tell the truth. She was asked about Theo. "I've been Theo's school psychologist for over a year now," Bethany began professionally. "He was experiencing severe emotional trauma due to his mother's absence. There was anxiety, episodes of withdrawal, and sleep problems." "What is his condition now?" Jason's lawyer asked. "The situation has improved now," she replied. "Thanks to a stable environment at home and regular support, Theo has become more confident and calm. He studies well and is sociable. However, he still misses his mother and talks about her." Riley felt a lump form in her throat. "Do you think frequent changes in life can affect him?" asked the husband's lawyer. "Yes, absolutely. Stability and predictability are extremely important to him," Bethany emphasized. "Abrupt changes or uncertainty can exacerbate anxiety." She glanced briefly at Riley, who looked down. Riley's attorney also asked a couple of questions, trying to show that a mother's presence in a child's life is a positive factor if that presence is reliable and regular. Bethany agreed. Provided that his mother keeps her promises and adheres to the agreed-upon schedule, the meetings will certainly be of benefit to him. Theo loves his mother. The phrase hurt Riley with its simplicity. Her son loved her, no matter what. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wiped them with a handkerchief. Finally, the judge, having heard everyone, retired for a while and returned with a decision. Everyone stood up. "The minor's primary residence is to be with his father, Jason Brown." Her voice was clear. "The mother, Riley Brown, is to be granted visitation rights every weekend from Friday after school until Saturday morning, and every Tuesday evening via video link, plus half of the school holidays upon agreement." Riley barely breathed, absorbing every word. "The parents are required to adhere to the agreed schedule," the judge continued. "All meetings between the mother and the child are unsupervised, but on condition that the father is informed of their whereabouts. Both parents must contribute to the emotional well-being of their son and refrain from making mutual accusations in front of the child." The judge paused and looked sternly at them over her glasses. "There should be no breakdowns in agreements. The child needs stability. I hope you realize this." "Yes, Your Honor," Riley stammered, hiding her tears. "Yes, Your Honor," Jason nodded, placing his hand on his lawyer's shoulder. In addition, the judge leafed through the papers. "The divorce claim is satisfied. The marriage is officially dissolved. All property and financial agreements have been accepted by the parties. The parents retain equal rights to make important decisions regarding the child, but day-to-day decisions are made by the guardian, the father." She closed the folder. "Good luck to you. The meeting is over." The hammer struck. Riley stood there, stunned. That was it. The decision had been made and written down. Her family was a thing of the past. Jason was no longer her husband. Legally, they were strangers. And Theo. Theo was officially living with his dad now, and she was a scheduled guest. She staggered slightly, and the lawyer took her by the elbow. "Hang in there. It's actually a good decision," he said quietly. "You weren't suspended. You were given frequent meetings." She nodded mechanically. "Yes, thank you." Through a haze of tears, she watched Jason shake hands with his lawyer. Bethany walked up to him, whispered something. Jason nodded, then met Riley's gaze. He took a step closer. "Theo is at school now. I'll pick him up and tell him everything myself." Riley opened her mouth to argue, wanting to rush to her son so badly, but she realized it was the right thing to do. "Okay," she answered quietly. I'll call this evening." Jason shrugged. "Better tomorrow. Today he needs to digest the news. And you too." There was no malice in his voice, rather weariness. "Okay," she agreed. He stood awkwardly, then added, "I'm glad we did it in a civilized manner." Riley smiled bitterly. "It works, Theo." "Yeah." Jason looked down. "Good luck, Riley." "And you too," she whispered. He turned and walked away, holding the door for Bethany as she exited. She turned to Riley as if she wanted to say something, but changed her mind and just smiled sadly, disappearing after Jason. Riley stood in the empty courtroom, her hands shaking as she clutched the copy of the court order, the very papers that had drawn a line under her old life. Tears dripped onto the printed lines where it was written in black and white that she was a once-a-week visitor to her son. For the first time, she felt what it was like to officially lose her family, and at the same time, a thin ray of hope. The court had not deprived her of her son completely. Now everything depended only on her. Will she be able to justify the trust and become at least a shadow of the mother she was supposed to be? After the trial, Riley started her life anew, on the ruins of her old family, but with a firm resolve to make no more mistakes. She settled in Rochester, renting a small apartment not far from the area where Jason and Theo lived. The apartment was modest. One bedroom, a tiny living room combined with a kitchen and a balcony overlooking a parking lot. But for her, it didn't matter. The main thing was that she was now close to her son and could see him regularly. Riley's mornings began early. She got up at 6, did light exercises. The doctor advised her to do exercises to combat stress. Then she made herself coffee in a Turk. She could not afford to buy an expensive coffee machine, and there was no need. In the silence of the empty apartment, she sat at a small table, cupping the mug in her hands, and tuned in to the day. At such moments, she always remembered how the morning used to begin with fussing about her son to pack breakfast, remind him to put on his jacket. Now it was quiet. Sometimes this silence was oppressive, but Riley learned to accept it. After coffee, she would tidy herself up and go to work. She was lucky to get a job as a designer at a local marketing agency. The job was far less prestigious than in Seattle, no futuristic startups, just designing banners and websites for local companies. But the schedule was stable, 9 to 5, with a shortened day on Fridays. The management knew about her situation and was accommodating if she needed to leave early on the day of her meeting with her son. Her colleagues turned out to be nice people, although Riley was withdrawn at first. She no longer talked about any ambitious dreams or successes, and she didn't have any. She did her work conscientiously, but without the same fire. Sometimes she was overcome with regret. Here she was, drawing ad layouts for a car service, and now she could be in Seattle working on an application for millions of users. But as soon as she thought about her son, somewhere nearby, assembling Lego in his room, the regrets retreated. All these dreams were worth nothing compared to the reality, where she could at least hug her child once a week. After work, the evenings were quiet. Previously, she would sit up late, improving her skills. Working as a freelancer, now the evenings were free. At first, she did not know what to do with herself. There were almost no friends left in Rochester, many had moved away, and she had lost contact. Her parents visited occasionally. They were glad that their daughter had come to her senses, but the condemnation for the past was felt. Their support was restrained. They helped with the move, but otherwise made it clear that they expected her to do it herself from now on. To keep from going crazy within four walls, Riley signed up for yoga classes twice a week in the evenings. The exercise and meditation helped calm her anxious thoughts. There at yoga, she met a woman named Catherine, a divorced mother of two. Catherine turned out to be cheerful and kind. After learning Riley's story, she honestly, albeit without details, told how she screwed up and was now trying to regain her son's trust. Catherine took her under her wing. Sometimes after yoga, they would go for tea, and for the first time in a long time, Riley felt less alone. Her friend gave her practical advice on how to improve her life and how to cope with guilt. It turned out that many mothers make mistakes, but not everyone is ready to admit them. Talking to Catherine eased the burden on Riley's soul a little. She stopped considering herself a unique monster. The most important days now were Fridays. The court ruled that every Friday after school, Riley could take Theo home for the evening and night, and then drive him back to his father on Saturday mornings. She treasured those few hours more than anything else. On the first Monday after the trial, she started a habit. She hung a calendar on the refrigerator and circled all the Fridays with a red marker, the days she would see her son. It was her beacon, her reason for the week. Every Friday like this, she prepared in advance. On Thursday evening, she ran to the store to buy groceries to cook Theo's favorite dish, or at least stock up on his favorite pepperoni pizza. At home, she gradually acquired things for her son: a cot with new colorful dinosaur bed linen, a toy box. She mostly bought old toys from friends or found something from Theo's childhood that her parents had kept. She wanted the boy to feel cozy with her, at least a little like home. Their first evening together was awkward and touching. Riley arrived at school early, her heart pounding with excitement. When Theo appeared at the door with a backpack, she waved at him. The boy ran to his classmates, but noticed her and froze. Then he slowly approached. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, honey." She smiled and crouched down to hug him. He let her, though not as tightly as before. "How's school?" "Normal," he shrugged. Riley carefully took his backpack. "Ready to come with me?" Theo nodded. The drive took 15 minutes, and he was silent the entire time in the car, fiddling with the keychain. Riley tried asking questions: how were you? What was new? But she got monosyllabic answers. She sensed his wariness and knew it took time. At home, she showed him the room, or rather the corner of the living room, where his folding bed with dinosaurs stood. "Cool," was all he said, looking at the underwear. "I ordered the pizza you like." "It'll be here soon," Riley said. Theo just nodded again, clearly unsure of how to deal with his mother in this new environment. But when they brought the old puzzle map of the USA from the shelf, which they had once assembled as a family, the boy's eyes came alive. "I remember him." "Yeah, you lost a little piece of Alabama then," Riley smiled. "It wasn't me, it was the cat who hid it," he objected. "Well, yes, well," she smiled slightly. And the ice was broken. While they were waiting for the pizza delivery guy, they sat down right on the carpet to put together a puzzle. Theo got really carried away, admonishing his mother. "No, that's not from here. Look, here's the border." Riley tried not to burst into tears of happiness. Everything suddenly became so natural, as if those 2 years of separation had never happened. The evening passed quietly. They ate pizza, completed the puzzle. They even found the missing Alabama. Apparently, Riley bought a new set. Then they watched a cartoon about space. Theo had become very interested in stars lately. By 9 o'clock, the boy began to nod off. As agreed, he spent the night at her place for the first time in a long time. Riley laid him down on a cot, covered him with a blanket. Theo asked sleepily, "Will you be nearby?" She realized that he was afraid that he would wake up and his mother would be gone. Her heart sank. "Of course, I'm here in the next room. I won't go anywhere," she assured. "Okay, good night, Mom," he muttered. "Good night, darling," she whispered and kissed him on the forehead. When he fell asleep, Riley sat on the couch and let herself cry, bright tears this time. Today hadn't been perfect, but it had been better than she'd feared. Her son hadn't pushed her away. In fact, as he approached bedtime, he seemed almost his old self again, a trusting, affectionate boy. For the first time in a long time, Riley fell asleep peacefully that night, smiling. She felt like all was not lost. The new life was going on as usual. Days of work and household chores were followed by Fridays of soul soothing with her son. Riley had established a few small rituals for herself. On Wednesdays, she would buy fresh fruit at the farmer's market. On Saturdays, she would go to the library to borrow books. She had resumed an old hobby, reading novels, which she had previously abandoned. She avoided social media, the news about Seattle, anything that might make her yearn for the past. She needed to look forward. Sometimes, of course, it would hit her, especially on holidays when her son wasn't with her. At Christmas, she'd bake cookies and imagine Theo celebrating with his father and Bethany by the tree. At those moments, the pain would press on her chest again. But Riley held on. On those days, she'd mostly call Catherine or go to her parents' house just to avoid being alone with the heavy thoughts. Gradually, a quiet, honest life became a habit. Riley no longer made grandiose plans. She learned to enjoy the little things. Her joy was her son's laughter when he came on Fridays. His drawings that he gave her one especially dear. It was of the three of them, Theo drew his mom, dad, and himself, albeit on separate houses, but next to each other under the same sun. His successes at school, which she now knew about not from rare mailings, but firsthand. Jason sometimes informed her if Theo was doing well, and even sent a photo. Apparently, he also appreciated that she kept her word and did not let her son down. Riley realized this is the price and reward for her mistakes. A quiet, simple life, with no room for euphoria, but plenty of room for small, real joys. Several months passed. Riley and Theo's Friday night meetings had become a regular ritual, a small celebration at the end of each week that they both looked forward to. Every Friday afternoon, Riley would arrive at the school a half hour before the bell rang, eager to see her son. In the winter, she would wait for him in the school hall, shaking snow off her coat. In the spring, she would stand under the apple tree in bloom by the gate, a fresh board game or book tucked under her arm, ready to surprise Theo. Over time, the boy got used to it and began to run out to her as soon as he saw her. Sometimes he would run out with a joyful cry, "Mom!" And these moments were the best reward for Riley. He would get into her car and on the way excitedly tell her about his week, about the new video game his friend showed him, about how he got an A on his natural history project. Riley listened attentively, nodded, and asked questions. She noticed that Theo began to share with her more willingly and that wariness of the first meetings was becoming less and less. At home, they had a routine. First, they decided what they would have for dinner. Most often, the choice fell on pizza. It became a tradition, Pizza Friday. Theo even joked, "Mom, we have PP again, right?" He winked. "PP?" She pretended not to understand. "Pizza Friday," he laughed in response. "Exactly, how could I forget?" Riley played along eagerly. They ordered from the same pizza place on the corner, they even knew them by name. The delivery guy would show up at roughly the same time, and Theo would race to open the door. "Hey, buddy, standard order pepperoni and cheese sticks?" The delivery guy would smile. Theo would nod proudly, accepting the warm box. After pizza, it was time for the second traditional item on the agenda, games or puzzles. Riley had already amassed a collection of family games in her living room. Dominoes, Uno, Monopoly for kids, puzzles. But her favorite was still the puzzle with the map of the United States, with which it all began. They put it together many times, and each time Theo deliberately hid a piece of Florida or Texas, so that later he could, magically, find it under the couch. Riley pretended to be surprised each time, and they laughed. Sometimes they alternated activities, like painting together. Riley taught him a few watercolor techniques, or baking something simple, like chocolate muffins from a ready-made mix. On one visit in the spring, she brought tomato seedlings and suggested they plant them on the balcony together. Theo enthusiastically watered his pot, getting covered in dirt. Then he ran back to check if the sprouts had sprouted. They also developed their own little ritual for bedtime. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Riley would remind him, "Shower and pajamas." Theo would sometimes be capricious like, "Just a little bit more, one more cartoon," but she was gentle but firm. A routine is a routine, as Bethany advised. As a result, the boy obediently went to brush his teeth. On the cot, his favorite blanket and a soft raccoon toy were waiting for him, which he himself moved from his dad's house, so that his mother would also have his sleep guardian. Riley read to him at night. At first he resisted, he thought he was big, but then he got used to it and even chose the book himself. Most often it was an encyclopedia about space or a collection of stories about dinosaurs. His head lay on her lap, and while she read about distant galaxies or tyrannosaurs, he would sometimes fall asleep right under her measured voice. Then Riley would carefully move his head onto the pillow, cover him with a blanket, and sit quietly next to him for a few more minutes, listening to his breathing. These moments of peace, when her son slept at her home, were the most precious thing in her new life. Of course, not everything was always perfect. Sometimes Theo would come home in a bad mood, he had a fight with someone at school or was tired, and then he would snap or refuse to play. Riley learned not to take offense, but to find a patient approach. She remembered the psychologist's words about stability and support. On such days, they would simply watch his favorite movie or build silently from Lego. The main thing was that she was there, did not press, and the boy gradually thawed. Jason also appreciated that the Friday rituals had become a habit. On Saturday mornings, he would pick up his son at 9, as agreed. At first, there was tension between the adults when they met, but over time the ice melted a little. If Jason was a few minutes late, Riley no longer twitched. She knew that he could be delayed by traffic. When he came to pick up Theo one day, found him and Riley finishing their morning cocoa in the kitchen and even continued the conversation. "What did you do yesterday?" "We were playing hide and seek," Theo answered willingly. "I know all of Mom's hiding places in the apartment." Well, Jason chuckled. "Come on, champ." Riley handed Jason the container. "There are some cupcakes here. We baked them yesterday. Theo wanted to treat us." Jason looked surprised and pleased as he accepted the treat. "Oh, thank you." "You're welcome," she smiled. "They're a little dry there, but—" "I think we'll figure it out," he interrupted good-naturedly. When saying goodbye, Theo hugged his mother without embarrassment in front of his father, and this also became the norm. Bethany would sometimes come with Jason to pick Theo up, too. At first, she would wait in the car, but later, as things warmed up, she would stop by to say hello. Riley felt awkward at first, but to her relief, Bethany didn't try to be superior. Instead, she complimented Theo. "He's so smart. At school, everyone only says good things about him." Riley thanked and confessed. "This is also your merit. Thank you for supporting him." Bethany waved it off. "I did what I could. The main thing is that he's doing well now." These short exchanges convinced Riley that there really was a good man in her former family now. It wasn't easy to accept at first, but with each Friday night, when she handed her happy little son back to his father and saw him gently taking his hand, with Bethany walking by her side, waving at her in a friendly manner, Riley knew that everything was going as it should. Friday rituals became her anchor. They filled the week with meaning. At the office, colleagues noticed that she was always in high spirits on Thursdays, and on Fridays she practically flew. Riley just laughed in response. "You should know what my plans are for the evening." No one really asked. Everyone knew she was spending time with her son. Thus, from small traditions, a new strong feeling was formed: her connection with Theo. Not a mother heroine, not the main educator, but not a guest anymore, but an important, reliable part of his life. Once a week, but forever. Another year passed. Life was settling into its new form, and then came the events that finally cemented the changes. Jason and Bethany announced their engagement. It wasn't a surprise to Riley. She saw how strong their relationship was, and she knew that sooner or later they would formalize their union. But hearing the news was still difficult. She learned about the wedding from Theo himself. One spring, when he came to her on another Friday, the boy smiled mysteriously all the way home. "Why are you so mysterious?" Riley teased him, trying to figure out the reason. "I won't say. A surprise," he sang. "Wow, a surprise for me too?" she asked in surprise. Theo nodded, beaming. "Guess." Riley pretended to think. Did you win the lottery? Or did your dad buy you a pony?" The boy giggled. "No." "Well, Mom, you don't know how to guess." "Then I give up. Speak up." He made a serious face and said, "Dad proposed to Miss Bethany, and she accepted. There will be a wedding." Riley tried to hide the momentary stab of pain and smiled. "What news? Congratulations, my joy. Are you happy?" "Yeah, I'll even be the main one at the wedding. I'll be the ring bearer," he proudly declared. "Wow, you'll be responsible," she stroked his head. "You'll cope, I'm sure." Her heart sank, but she was honestly happy for her son. He looked happy. Later, while putting Theo to bed, Riley allowed herself to cry in private. Although she had come to terms with the loss of her husband, the news that he would be married to someone else forever still left a sad feeling. But then she forced herself to accept that this wedding was a logical step. And most importantly, it was a blessing for Theo. He would have a full family, perhaps even siblings. A week after that conversation, Jason called. He hadn't called for a long time. Usually all organizational matters were discussed by email. His voice sounded a little timid. Riley, hi. I wanted to, uh, let you know in person that Bethany and I have decided to get married in July. Yes, Theo already told me, she answered calmly. Oh, I see. He hesitated. Listen, we were thinking. If you don't mind, you could come to the ceremony. Theo will be glad to see you there. Riley wasn't expecting the invitation. Her throat was dry. I don't know if this is right, she said honestly. I understand, Jason said quickly. No pressure. Just know that you can come if you want, as a guest for my son's sake. Riley paused, then exhaled. Thank you. I'll think about it. That's where it ended. She was tormented by her thoughts for a long time. On the one hand, attending her ex-husband's wedding was no easy task. On the other hand, if she didn't go, would she regret it? Theo probably really wanted to see his mother among the guests to share the joy. In the end, Riley decided to go. For her son. And here it is a sunny July day, a small church on the outskirts of town. Riley sits in the back row, trying to be inconspicuous. She chose a modest pastel dress so as not to attract attention. My heart pounds when Bethany comes down the aisle in an elegant white dress to the sounds of a violin. She is beautiful. Her happy eyes are shining, a crown of wildflowers on her head. Jason is next to her fit, excited, in a new suit. And at the front of the procession, little Theo strides importantly in a strict children's tuxedo, carrying the rings on a velvet pillow. He looks extremely serious. He looks around the room for his mother with his eyes, and, noticing her, he smiles happily and waves his hand. Riley barely holds back her tears and discreetly waves back. The ceremony is a blur to her. She hears Jason uttering his vows of love and fidelity, words he once spoke to her, and Bethany, soft and excited, uttering the same vows back. When they are asked to exchange rings, Theo steps forward and hands her a cushion. Riley sees his hands shaking with excitement, but everything goes smoothly. The guests applaud the newlyweds kiss, and the violin begins to play a cheerful melody. Riley quietly wipes away tears of joy and a little sadness and claps too. She sincerely wishes them happiness. There is no other way. After the ceremony, she wanted to quietly leave, but a voice caught up with her. Riley, wait. She turns around. It's Bethany, now Mrs. Brown, walking toward her through the crowd of guests, holding the hem of her dress. Jason is talking to a relative nearby, and Bethany is clearly moving toward her. Riley freezes, unsure of what to expect. Thank you for coming, Bethany says, a little out of breath but beaming. This means a lot to Theo. Riley looks away, embarrassed. I couldn't miss his moment. He was so proud of the role. Bethany suddenly takes her hand. It's important for us too. True. Riley dares to look her in the eye. I'm so happy for you. You're wonderful, and you make them happy. Bethany smiles softly. Thank you. I promise I'll be good. She pauses, choosing her words. Mom, Riley finishes quietly for her. I meant friend, but if he ever wants to call me Mom, I'll accept it with honor. Bethany squeezes her hand. But you'll always be his mom. That can't be changed. The words send a shiver through Riley, a mixture of gratitude and relief. Tears well up in her eyes again. Thanks for understanding. Bethany suddenly gives her a quick one-armed hug. We are all trying for him. Riley hugs her back timidly, feeling the old weight of rivalry and jealousy lift from his heart. They are together for him. A minute later, Bethany is called away for a photo shoot, and she runs away, leaving Riley with an unusually light heart. She slips out of the church, gets into her car, and allows herself to cry, but there is more light in those tears than dark. A couple of months after the wedding, Theo brought more news. They were stacking Lego on the carpet when their son suddenly said, "We'll probably have a baby." Riley froze. What? Whose? My mom and dad. I mean Bethany, he corrected himself. She said I might have a baby brother in the spring. Riley felt her heart skip a beat. There it was, the anticipation. She forced a smile. Wow, are you happy? Very much. Theo nodded. I'll be the big brother. Won't it be cool? That's right, cool. She hugged her son, hiding her own confusion. You can handle it. You're already an adult. The night after that visit, Riley sat on the balcony for a long time, looking at the stars. Jason was going to have a new baby. Theo was going to have a brother or sister. And for her, her chapter with them was finally over. Surprisingly, this thought did not overwhelm her as it might have before. Yes, there was a subtle sadness, but stronger was the feeling of the rightness of what was happening. Everything fell into place. Theo had a happy family that was growing. He was happy she saw it every week. Wasn't that what she wanted, even without her? Riley took a breath of the cool autumn air and found herself smiling. There was still a lot of work to do on herself, on being a long-distance mother. But she no longer felt out of place or unnecessary. Her son loved her and came to her with joy. And the rest was life, going on as usual. Theo's 10th birthday was bright and warm, and not only because of the golden September sun. His 10th birthday was celebrated with the whole extended family. Jason and Bethany had a picnic in the city park and invited relatives and friends. Riley was invited too now. It didn't seem like anything special, but rather natural. Tables of refreshments were set out on the grassy lawn, and balloons dangled from the tree branches. The 10-year-old birthday boy ran around with his friends, pretending to be pirates, while the adults watched and chatted. Riley stood at the lemonade table, helping to pour drinks. Bethany bustled about, making sure everyone got a piece of birthday cake. At her feet, a baby was snoring softly in a carrier, her and Jason's 4-month-old daughter, Theo's little sister. The baby was born in the spring, and Theo adored her, proudly pointing out "my sister Ellie" to everyone. So, who wants some more lemonade? Riley asked loudly. For me, Theo responded, running up out of breath. Mom, pour me some, I'm thirsty. Riley poured a full glass and handed it to her son. He quickly drained half of it and smiled. Thank you. Don't rush, or you'll hiccup, she smiled back, wiping a drop from his chin. Pirates don't hiccup, he objected, and, kissing his mother on the cheek, he ran off to his friends. Riley laughed. This spontaneous kiss in front of everyone would have once been something unusual, but now it was just a part of life. Riley, try this cake Bethany baked herself, Jason's mother called to her, holding out a plate with a piece. Oh, definitely, Riley picked up her fork. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Call me Joan as long as you like. The older woman waved her off good-naturedly. She, too, had changed her attitude toward her. She saw how hard she was trying for Theo. Riley took a bite of the cake. It was wonderful, fluffy, with soft blueberries. She caught Bethany's eye. Very tasty. Really, she beamed. I was worried that I might have overdried it. Just right, Jason confirmed, walking past with the baby in his arms. My wife is a master cook. There was pride in his voice. Riley felt a little twinge, not of pain, but rather of pleasant nostalgia. He had once spoken like that about her signature apple pie. But things were different now, and rightly so. The party was a great success. Theo was beaming with happiness, having received a bunch of gifts. Riley gave him a telescope. The idea was suggested by Bethany, knowing about his love for space. No one divided the guests into us and them. Everyone was there for the boy, and this filled the heart with warmth. In the evening, when the picnic was over and everyone was leaving, Theo first went home with his father, and the others. The second part of the holiday, a family dinner, was waiting for them there. As they parted, he hugged Riley. Mom, will you call later? I'll tell you what Dad gave me. Of course I'll call, she smiled, hugging him. Happy birthday again, my dear. She helped him into Jason's car. He thanked her for helping him with the party. We couldn't have done it without you. I'm glad you were with us. I'm glad too, Riley admitted. It means a lot to me. They smiled warmly at each other. In these smiles, there was no longer a shadow of the past, only mutual respect. When everyone had left, Riley returned to her car. Dusk was falling on the park. The air was crisp. She got behind the wheel, but did not rush to start the engine. Her gaze fell on the box lying on the passenger seat. There were the remains of a cake, carefully packed by Bethany for her to take with her. A fleeting thought flashed. Who would have thought that it would be like this: a new wife baking her a cake, an ex-husband thanking her for her help, a son hugging both his mother and stepmother with equal freedom. Once upon a time, it seemed unthinkable, but they have come a long way. Riley remembered her old self running from life in pursuit of a dream, hiding from truth and responsibility. Back then, she thought that the honest path was to follow the call of the heart at any cost. But it turned out that honesty is something else. In the ability to admit mistakes, take responsibility for them, and move on without running away. She pulled a small photograph from her purse, a faded snapshot 4 years old. It showed her and Jason as young children, holding baby Theo at Niagara Falls, dripping wet and happy. Riley could look at it now without the sting of pain. It had been a wonderful time, but it would never come back. It didn't need to come back. There was a new one ahead. She put the photo away and looked at her reflection in the mirror. There was fatigue in her eyes, fine wrinkles, but also a calm that had not been there before. A tear rolled down her cheek, this time a light one. Riley smiled to herself and finally started the engine. A home awaits her, quiet, empty, but one that she has created anew with her own efforts. A job awaits her, not brilliant, but stable and needed by people. The next Friday evening with her son awaits her. They are going to start a new 1,000-piece puzzle, the most difficult of those they have tried. And she also has a future ahead of her, in which she will move forward as a different person, without illusions, but also without bitterness, with clarity and honesty before herself and her loved ones. Riley pulled out of the parking lot and onto the evening street. The headlights picked out the road ahead, straight as an arrow. She kept a firm grip on the wheel. This road, her honest road, was just beginning. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.